Your hair keeps disappearing in the blue.
I know. I don't have a really good background at home, so that's why I was using this. Is does that work for you guys?
It's
If
fine.
if not, I can.
No, it's
Let's see. Are we live?
We are live, but we're early.
Okay. I was trying to think about changing the background. Where can I do that? Okay, goes in
yes.
the settings. Um, virtual background. How's that? Is that better?
Let me stop my this.
Or maybe.
Oh, there's the there.
Well, so is this a better maybe?
That's a fun one.
I wish I was there.
Right. Um, so just on your the Core Logic website,
Hmm.
um, I'll pull that up. Just you can explain what Core Logic, what they are, what it is,
Okay.
company does. Oh, I gotta get my phone going here. Make it quiet. So you're in Los Angeles, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
So do people ever mistake you for Selma? How do I say Selma Helmick?
Mm.
Helmick?
Hi. So my hike? Yeah, I wish.
I,
No. No, not no such luck.
so you do have an accent. What country were you born in?
Croatia.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
heard phenomenal things about Croatia.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful country. It's beautiful. I mean, there's not much to say other than it's beautiful. It's just, it's been through a lot of things. If you're familiar with conflict in former Yugoslavia,
Yeah,
and that. So, um, but you know,
my my mechanic for my cars is Bosnian,
oh,
and
okay.
about the same age as I am. So he went through the conflict, and
Hmm.
uh, it's amazing listening to some of his stories.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah. I lived there during that time too. I came after the end of the war.
war is not a very nice thing at all. That is for sure.
No.
What was your family involved in real estate over there, or how did the whole real estate thing come about?
Well, no, not yes. Okay, in a sense, yes. I have a sister who still lives in Croatia, and she has a real estate company.
Okay,
My dad was in construction. My dad did commercial construction um, um, for work. He had his own company. Later in his life, before his retirement, he started working on wrought iron art. So, he built like those beautiful gates, of wrought iron, made of wrought iron, and balconies and things like that. And he also then ended up getting a license. He was one of the only people that was licensed for historical renovation. So some of the stuff that was unfortunately damaged by the war, he ended
sure.
up doing some of the reconstruction work. There was a
Okay,
basilica from 13th century that he actually worked on. So pretty
wow.
cool. Yeah, pretty
You know,
cool.
we in the United States have a bit of a different perspective of what's old compared to
Yeah,
Europe.
right.
I know my wife and I went to Spain, and we went to this town called Ronda, and they have
Hmm.
two bridges in the town, the old bridge
Hmm.
and the new bridge. Well, the new bridge was like from the 16th century, and the old bridge was from the like 8th or 9th century, something like that. It was just
Yeah.
so funny to hear that. And then a couple of years ago, we went to Israel and
Hmm.
Jordan. I mean,
Yeah, I'll do this.
over
This is
there,
better.
new stuff means after Christ. The old stuff is BC kind of.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how that is, right?
It truly, truly is amazing. And then, then here in the states, we talk about, oh, they live in an old house. It's 40 or 50 years old.
Hmm. Right, right.
But I guess living in a stone house, you could that'll theoretically stay standing for quite a long time. At least the foundation will.
Right, right.
All right. Well, it is noon and it's Friday, and this is the Smart Market call. So let's kick this off. So today our guest is Selma Hepp. Welcome, Selma Hepp. And I'm going to share. You are from the company called. Oops, I can get that out of the way. Core Logic. Um,
Yes.
so before we get into the conversation, tell us a little bit about Core Logic. What goes on there?
Sure. So CoreLogic it's in essence a data company. We collect all types of property data, and so our logo is find, buy, and protect. So with that data, we built a lot of supportive services for industries, real estate industries such as real estate agents, lenders, brokers, mortgage brokers, insurers, appraisers. So we provide a lot of different platforms for them to perform their jobs while transactions are happening in real estate space.
So it's not a consumer type company. It's a business to business intelligence and research
Exactly.
platform. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Um, and so, why would you be on our show? Tell us about Selma?
Sure, thanks. So I'm a deputy chief economist at CoreLogic, and I utilize this data that we have to predict and to understand housing market trends. We have some very unique data. So, I mentioned property information, but then we do build a lot of forecasts based on that data. We have a home price index. We have housing market index, housing conditions index, which all look at change in home prices over time and the potential of risk of price declines if markets are deemed overvalued in relationship to what the local incomes are. And so we do a lot of narrative around what's happening in the housing markets
And
nationally.
how big is this team that you work with?
Oh, it's actually not that big. It's about five of us, six
Okay.
of us. Yeah, yeah. So it's relatively speaking, I guess not that big of a team.
But you're collecting the data and packaging it to help like a mortgage lender or real estate brokerage type company.
Yeah, yeah. And nowadays, a lot of investors, real estate investors use our data to assess their portfolios, and to, look at the risk factors. We do also look at the lending standards, lending risk, collateral risk. A lot of things that are all related to property. I mean, it's pretty amazing the entire industry that exists around housing. So and
Yeah.
sometimes we just think, oh, it's just about buying a house. Well, it's a whole huge industry that exists around housing.
I think people, you don't, in your lifetime, you probably have very few transactions or the
Right,
business of your house.
right,
Um,
right.
I guess maybe if you're a renter, but yeah, I think we kind of forget about it's a massive industry, and it matters to the people who use materials exchange, obviously, because
Hmm.
the main one of the main components going into housing is lumber, um,
Hmm.
or
Right, right.
wood products. So, all right, let's get into it. What's
Sounds
going
good.
on in housing? Things are pretty weird right now. I guess this
Yeah.
is probably like the super fun time for an economist because things are changing. Like what you are looking at has got to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, things have been changing. Things have been sort of out of whack, say professional terminology, ever since the pandemic started. So, and now we're at the point where we are decelerating from red hot housing market conditions, and things are changing really rapidly. And to some extent, it's hard to really determine where things are going to go because there's so many things influencing what matters for housing or home purchases, such as mortgage interest rates, But nevertheless, we are at the time now where we've had about 200-300 basis points increase in mortgage rates.
Right.
It has had a significant impact on affordability, and so it has pushed out a lot of potential home buyers out of the market. And so now we are sort of trying to see, where are we going to land at this point? Are we really in a crisis situation, or we are just coming off of really, really strong demand, and a situation where we had extreme demand, not enough supply, which led to home price appreciation in upwards of 20, as much as 40% rate increase on a year-over-year basis. So, I would say we are slowing, we're transitioning, but I'm still not that concerned that we are going, in a dip.
Uh, well, there's a main driver of housing
Mhm.
is household formation.
Household
So,
formation. Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
you know, you're never going to go to zero in housing because you're always going to be needing new homes. Um, Recently I think I saw the average age of a house in the United States is the oldest that it's ever been. Um,
right, exactly, and that has to do with lack of new construction, because after the last crisis, in when things really went downhill in 2008, 9, 10, we just stopped building, in essence. And so we've been just slowly crawling up out of that hole. And really, it was in 2021 where we, for the first time, reached the level of new construction that we had 20 years ago. So for that reason, I think now the distribution has shifted towards a larger share of older homes in the U.S.
um, okay, so look, I think we've established housing is strong. It's probably going to stay okay. We don't see a dip coming.
Yeah,
Um, but where and what? I think that's what everybody really wants to know is where's going to be the housing. Because look, housing is not flat across the whole United States. There's hot zones, hot areas, cold areas. So let's talk about that geographically. What is the trend, and what do you forecast as far as
yeah,
where the
right.
housing is going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many dynamics going on, and some of them happened prior to pandemic, some of them were exacerbated by the pandemic. But a lot of people moved during the pandemic, and so it caused some markets to really overheat, and home prices to accelerate, like I said, in 30 plus range. On an annual basis. And so some of those markets are slowing down now. So, to give you an example, we've had some, I want don't exactly remember the number. I think 30 straight months in Case-Shiller Home Price Index. We had some 30 straight months of strongest home price growth in Phoenix. And in the last few months, when we looked at the data, we saw most significant slowing in monthly gains in Phoenix. So
Okay.
some of these markets, another one would be, for example, Boise, Idaho, and some markets in Pacific Northwest, Riverside, California, for example. So some of these markets that have had such strong home price appreciation that led to a lack of affordability. Maybe that was already the case before the pandemic, but now it just got worse. Some of these markets are still in cooling because people just simply cannot afford, or they're by the same token worried about what's going to happen to those markets, because they were already markets that were in the hit hardest during the last crisis, right? So naturally that fear is there. On the other hand, we have markets in Southeast, in Texas, where we do continue to see a lot of home price appreciation, a lot of people moving there. So a lot of population growth, and expected future population growth. So naturally, I think we will continue to see the strong demand there, in those markets, and likely a strong home price growth. Now, I think 30% is unreasonable to continue to see in the future, but some single digits, or going back to some historical mean of 5 to 6%, I think it's completely reasonable.
Now, when you see this house price appreciation, are you seeing new homes in those areas as well? I mean, that's what really matters to us.
Right,
Where's
right.
where are the nails going through wood?
Yeah, and we do exactly. So some of these states that I mentioned, like Texas and Carolinas and Tennessee, these are some of the states where we've seen most new single family homes being sold and obviously constructed. It's because things are a little bit different there in terms of availability or ability, just ability to construct new homes, and restrictions that are in place. And maybe builders are even more willing to go to those markets knowing that the population growth is going to sustain. So these are the markets that we think, those are going to be sort of not hot markets but sustained markets in the future. Markets where it's more difficult to build, where the home price growth has just led to people leaving the areas. I mean, there's so many stories about Western markets such as San Francisco, LA, maybe Seattle. Those folks are to some extent leaving. And I won't say that it's an exodus, because I mean, that's just a headline, because it's not an exodus, but there is a significant portion of the population that they can't afford anymore to be there. And so they'll pick up, they may be able to work from home, and they'll pick up and go to these other states that are more affordable and where there's new homes available to buy.
Let's touch on that. The work from home phenomena.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, the pandemic accentuated that. We now have many more tools
Hmm.
from a technology standpoint that it allows
Hmm.
working from home. Um, what are some of the overlooked areas you think, overlooked geographic areas that people who are working from home, working remotely, are trending towards? I wouldn't expect someone who could work from home to say, "Oh, I'm going to go live in San Francisco." They
Yeah.
probably would
Yeah.
want to work or live somewhere else. What's an overlooked area that you think
Yeah,
the
so
forecast
I
can
think
get
we
better?
saw we saw a lot of people moving to areas that allow for a lot of outdoor amenities. Whether that's like lakes or mountains, or even areas with universities. Like Ohio has been one of the markets that people think it's going to be a potentially a good investment market going forward, just because it's a green state in the sense that there's a lot of mountains and woods and lakes and those kind of things. It didn't see the same level of appreciation as some of the other markets did, and hence it's maybe now a little bit more affordable. And overall, it's been a more affordable market. So I think some of these markets along the Midwest, North Midwest, on the east side of the Midwest region, I think that those are some good opportunity markets.
That's interesting. I mean, it's the Rust Belt. Evidently, they're knocking the rust off the Rust Belt a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's very interesting. So I used to live in Buffalo, New York. I got my master's degree when I was living in Buffalo. I went to UB, Buffalo, UB, SUNY U at Buffalo, and people were leaving in hordes at that time. This was in 2002 to 2004, and now all I'm hearing is a lot of people coming back. It's affordable. Again, I think we cannot underestimate the importance of, if you can afford something, you may, you'll find a way to like it or appreciate it, as opposed to spending all your entire income on housing somewhere, where it's just cool to be.
So now let's shift gears a little bit and just talk about the house itself. Um, our house is getting bigger, smaller. What do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, we definitely saw people buying larger homes. With having to do all these other activities now from home, people do want more rooms, and so there's been an increase in square footage on sale of the existing homes. Now, I think in terms of the new homes, the latest data that I saw is, somewhat small, somewhat a reduction in the size, and that has to do with just, you know what type of buyer you're looking at, because first time buyer, which is the largest cohort of buyers right now, or those younger millennial buyers, are obviously going to buy their starter homes, which is going to be smaller than move up buyers. But then on the other hand, there's the luxury home sales have done also really, really well during the pandemic. So there is that, skewing towards larger size home too. So, I think, on average, you probably will see same size average home, but it's been skewed towards smaller and then larger, luxury homes.
And we talked about yesterday, if you're leaving a high cost area for housing, moving to a lower cost area, whatever equity you have in your home will buy more home, a
Yeah.
bigger house where you're going.
Right.
So,
Right.
that it's got to, I would guess someone who's leaving San Francisco that owned a home would move to Columbus, Ohio, and think they could probably buy a castle.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And there was a research done recently that looked at why we had the level of home price appreciation that we had over the last couple of years, and they show that it's actually in large part due to these folks that have larger budgets, lived in more expensive areas, and then maybe cashed out on the equity, and now moved to more affordable areas. But because they have larger budgets to work with, they were bidding more and more in view of a very tight supply, and hence home prices were going up at 20, 30, 40%. And we saw over the last year some 7 in 10 homes selling over the asking price. And again, that's because these folks had the budgets, so much larger budgets to bid for that limited inventory.
Let's touch on the single family for rent
Okay.
and the investor. Who is the single family home investor today? The single family for rent.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are mostly larger corporations that had investors such as hedge funds, and a lot of these, what they call powder, a lot of what the
Uh,
reference is soft powder or
dry
something.
powder.
Dry powder. Yeah, that they were employing the dry powder. But nevertheless, I mean, it's a very interesting phenomenon that's going on, because to some extent, a lot of people are concerned about what that means for opportunity to own a home for those that are they have smaller budgets, or maybe smaller income, obviously.
The
But
competition, like if prices fall, the investor type, the corporate investor, is a bit of a backstop for falling prices.
Right, right. So there is some advantages to that, because investors are going into the same markets where we see a lot of population growth, and so they're betting on continuous demand. And some of the folks that move to another state will not immediately buy a home. They will rent first, and they will test out the market, test out the neighborhood, look at do I really like living here? In theory, uh, you can imagine living in some place and it's beautiful, but it just doesn't mesh, and you end up not liking it and moving back, and so on and so forth. But it provides opportunity for more mobility for people to test out new location, and that's a good that's a good economic engine. So it gets some local economies going by allowing people to move there. The other thing is, some investors, if they're investing in already existing housing stock, and we talked about how existing housing stock is so much older, they have the cash to renovate, and sometimes first-time home buyers don't have the cash to renovate.
Right.
So there is that. So there's good and bad, but I would say, I think overall it would help to just have more new construction in general, not just the one skewed towards built for rent, but also the one for people to buy. So, I think that's going to come with with fewer supply chain obstacles in a way, and as we move out of this pandemic and go back to somewhat normal level of being able to obtain materials for
Yeah,
construction.
look, we experienced it in the lumber market for sure. It seems to be normalizing now.
Mhm.
But I think there's some wild cards out there for sure with the supply chain. Right now, we see quite a bit of wood coming from offshore, from Europe, because their economy's kind of in the dumps. So if that European economy straightens itself out and less Euro wood comes to the shores, that could change things from a pricing on material standpoint. Um, let's quickly talk about a market that defies a bit of logic, which is Florida.
Yes.
What your favorite topic? What's going
Yeah.
on in Florida?
Yeah, so that's another place where I lived. I lived in Tampa, Florida, after leaving Buffalo, because when you live in Buffalo, you had to move to Florida.
Of
It
course.
was like the entire Midwest moved out of Midwest down to Florida. Well, that trend actually continued to happen during the pandemic, and to some extent, it even got larger in recent year, with a lot of people moving from Northeast states down to Florida. So there's a couple of things. One is that we have people retiring naturally. Baby boomers were the largest cohort in the U.S., and a lot of them are retiring. So they have a lot of equity that in their existing homes in Northeast, and that got even better during this time of home price appreciation, and so they may be cashing out, moving to Florida, sitting on the beach all day long. The other component to that demand is a lot of financial services actually moved from Northeast,
Right.
particularly in New York, and crypto was sort of a poster child for recent growth in financial services down in Florida, particularly Miami. So Miami actually has been one of the hottest rental market. We saw rents on single family homes going as much as 40% year over year in the last year. So so a lot of people are moving there, and again, supply hasn't kept up the pace, and so that's why we see such strong home prices up there, down in Florida.
I think what the current market has shown is that people can move faster than the capacity to build a house in the region can move there.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
yeah, it would be fantastic for people in Florida if there was more builders, more supply, if everything was more. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but you just moving your business is a lot more challenging than just moving a house, moving your household. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so
exactly.
let's
But
wrap
again,
up.
just a thought on that too. But then again, this is where work from home really helped drive that demand.
Of course, yeah,
You were just saying about moving businesses. So some people that actually get to work, they're lucky enough to get to work off of their computer, could have just moved anywhere, and that really provided for that demand surge.
yeah, for sure. And you can't just move a home building business to Florida. Uh,
Yes, exactly.
that's the challenging part.
Yeah.
Um, So let's wrap it up with my favorite question, of course, is what does Selma see that other people don't? And I'll lead you into this one because we talked about it yesterday, and I think it's a bit entertaining for me. Um,
Hmm.
but back on Florida, uh, hurricanes. What's your opinion there?
Yeah, yeah. So I mentioned I was living in Tampa, Florida, and this was 2004 through 2006. It was one of the biggest hurricane seasons down there. If you guys recall, Katrina happened during that time, and so, you know, um, it scared the hell out of me. Because I spent almost half of the year boarded up because I was, every other weekend there was a storm coming through. So that's my concern. I mean, do folks realize that this is a state that very prone to hazard risk, very prone to hurricanes, and we've had already extreme weather. Every year it gets worse, and this year too we are having extreme heat, extreme storms coming through. And so what happens when a really bad hurricane comes through that region, and where do people go? Because it's only one way out. It's up north. It's down up a couple roads, and so it's something to keep in mind. But the other thing is too, you then have to pay higher insurance costs. So you lose your home, think about how much more your insurance is going to be. And in some areas that have been prone to disasters, like fire disasters, after you rebuild or you try to buy a new home, your hazard insurance, your home insurance, puts you way out of your affordability range, and then you end up having to move somewhere else because you cannot afford to live there anymore. So
And
that's
then
it's a concern.
you coined that the phrase the halfbacks.
Halfbacks, yeah. So,
Mhm.
one thing we did see in Florida a lot of times is when people move from Northeast, they move to Florida and they stay a couple of years, but all of these things scare them, particularly when a hurricane comes through, and they move halfway back to like North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So we call those folks halfbacks, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and look, we see the same in the building. North Carolina is a strong housing market.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
well, this is great. I think you've pointed out what when I was thinking about the call here. Never before has the population been as mobile
hmm
as we are today. And from
yeah,
mobile, I'm not just saying driving around, but actually moving. Like
right.
you used to really be tied down because you had a
Hmm
job somewhere. Now you're not so tied down.
Yeah,
Even I think the kids going to schools, they're probably a little more flexible in moving
yeah,
schools today as well,
right.
because you don't necessarily lose your friends. You can stay in touch with them
Yeah,
through internet. And,
yeah.
anyway, that's great. Thank you so much for. I'm sorry for the time
That's
today. I think it's
okay.
really interesting. People can follow you on LinkedIn. I know you're a pretty avid poster there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and if you're a business and you have interest in getting some of this information, it's the website. I'll show you that one more time. Is CoreLogic.
Yep.
Um, so,
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
oh yeah, we appreciate it. We're going to do our best as an industry to supply the home builders and build as many homes as we possibly can to give you more things to talk about.
Yes, I look forward to that.
All right. Thank you very
Thank you,
much, everyone.
Michael.
Be safe. We will see you next week.